Madison Pierce, 26, returns home to Charleston, South Carolina for her younger brother's graduation party at the family's prestigious estate. Coming from a middle-class background while working as a struggling graphic designer in New York, she feels out of place among her father's wealthy business associates and society friends. During the celebration, her father, Robert Pierce, a successful real estate mogul, publicly humiliates her in front of guests, dismissing her career and comparing her unfavorably to more successful family friends. What Robert doesn't know is that Madison has been secretly building a revolutionary design platform that's about to secure a multi-million-dollar acquisition deal. That night, as family tensions explode and long-buried resentments surface, Madison must decide whether to reveal her hidden success or let her father's entitled world crumble under the weight of his own arrogance. A story about family expectations, hidden strength, and the moment when the underestimated rise to reclaim their worth. The humid Charleston air hit my face like a wall as I stepped out of the Uber, staring up at the Pierce family estate that had haunted my dreams for years. My name is Madison Pierce, and at 26, I thought I'd finally escaped the suffocating shadow of my father's expectations. But here I was, clutching my discount store dress and a graduation gift I'd saved 3 months to afford, walking back into the Lion's Den. The sprawling antebellum mansion stood like a monument to everything I'd never been good enough for. White columns stretched 3 stories high, framing perfectly manicured gardens where servers in crisp uniforms were already setting up for tonight's celebration. My younger brother Jake was graduating summa cum laude from the University of South Carolina with a business degree, and naturally, Dad was throwing the kind of party that would make Charleston society pages. I could hear the gentle clink of crystal, glasses being arranged on tables scattered across the back lawn, mixed with the distant sound of a string quartet tuning their instruments. The smell of magnolias and expensive catering drifted through the evening air, making my stomach clench with a familiar combination of nostalgia and dread. "Madison!" my mother's voice called out from the front steps. Patricia Pierce glided toward me in a flowing silk dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her smile bright, but her eyes already scanning my appearance with that subtle disappointment I knew so well. "Darling, you made it. How was the flight from New York?" "Long," I replied, accepting her air-kiss greeting. "But I wouldn't miss Jake's big night." She linked her arm through mine, leading me toward the house. "Your father's been so excited. The Hendersons are coming, and the Washingtons, and that lovely Sarah Mitchell. You remember, she just opened her 3rd boutique in downtown Charleston. So accomplished for someone your age." There it was. Less than 2 minutes home and already the comparisons were starting. I nodded and smiled, the mask I'd perfected over years of family gatherings sliding effortlessly into place. Inside, the house was exactly as I remembered. All dark wood and oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors, crystal chandeliers casting warm light over furniture that had been in the family for generations. Everything spoke of old money, established success, the kind of legacy that was supposed to pass down through bloodlines like a sacred trust. "Madison!" Jake's voice boomed from the main staircase. My little brother bounded down the steps, cap and gown draped over his arm, looking every inch the golden child in his perfectly fitted suit. At 22, he already carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. "Hey, graduate," I grinned, pulling him into a genuine hug. "Summa cum laude, huh? Show off." He laughed, spinning me around once before setting me down. "Had to keep up the Pierce family standards. Dad's been telling everyone I'm probably going to law school next, maybe Harvard." "Probably?" Jake's expression flickered for just a moment. "Well, you know Dad. He's got plans." Before I could ask what he meant, a familiar voice cut through the room like a blade. "Madison, you're here." I turned to see my father, Robert Pierce, emerging from his study with 2 men in expensive suits. At 58, he still commanded attention. Tall, silver-haired, with the kind of presence that made people automatically step aside when he walked through a room. His real estate empire had made him one of Charleston's most influential businessmen, and he never let anyone forget it. "Hi, Dad." I stepped forward for what I hoped would be a normal father-daughter greeting, but he barely glanced at me, his attention already shifting back to his companions. "This is my daughter Madison," he said to the men, his tone suggesting he was introducing a moderately interesting piece of furniture. "She's been playing around with, what do you call it, honey? Graphic design, up in New York." The dismissive way he said "playing around" made my chest tighten. "I run my own design studio, actually." Right. Dad waved his hand vaguely. "Gentlemen, these are the Callahan brothers. They own the largest construction firm in the Southeast. We're discussing the new waterfront development project." One of the brothers, a heavy-set man with kind eyes, smiled at me. "Graphic design, that's creative work. Must be exciting in New York." "It can be," I replied carefully, aware of Dad's subtle frown. "Well, creative fields are nice hobbies," the other brother chimed in, clearly trying to be supportive. "But nothing beats the stability of traditional business, right, Robert?" Dad's smile was sharp. "Exactly. Madison's always been artistic. But thankfully, Jake here has his head on straight. Going to build something real, something lasting." The words hit me like a physical blow. In less than 5 minutes, he'd managed to reduce my entire career. The company I'd been building for 3 years, the clients I'd fought to win, the 70-hour weeks I'd put in, to a hobby, a phase I'd eventually grow out of. "Dad," Jake started to say, but Robert was already steering the Callahan brothers toward the back patio. "Come on, let me show you the layout for tonight. We're expecting about 200 guests. Everyone who matters in Charleston business will be here." As they walked away, I stood in the entryway feeling like I was 16 again, watching my father's back as he moved on to more important things. The familiar ache of invisibility settled in my chest like an old wound. "He doesn't mean it the way it sounds," Jake said quietly, but we both knew that wasn't true. I forced a smile. "It's fine. I'm used to it." But even as I said it, my phone was buzzing in my purse with messages I couldn't let anyone see. Messages from my lawyer, from Tech Vision Industries, from the acquisition team that had been courting my company for months. Messages about the biggest deal of my life that could change everything. If only Dad knew what was really about to happen tonight. What would you do if your own father constantly dismissed everything you'd worked for? How would you handle coming home to face the family that never believed in you? As the sun began to set over Charleston and guests started arriving for Jake's party, I had no idea that before midnight, everything would change. But first, I had to survive dinner with 200 people who were about to witness something that would shatter my father's perfect world forever. By 8 o'clock, the Pierce estate had transformed into something out of Southern Living magazine. Japanese lanterns hung from the ancient oak trees, casting a warm glow over linen-covered tables scattered across the back lawn. The string quartet had been joined by a jazz ensemble, and servers moved through the crowd carrying trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more per bite than most people's dinner. I stood near the bar, nursing a glass of white wine and watching Jake work the crowd like he'd been born to it. He moved from group to group, charming Charleston's elite with stories about his thesis on sustainable business practices and his plans for law school. Everyone loved him. How could they not? He was everything a Pierce heir should be. Handsome, articulate, ambitious in all the right ways. "Madison Pierce, is that you?" I turned to find Sarah Mitchell approaching, resplendent in a designer dress that highlighted her perfect figure. We'd gone to high school together, but while I'd been buried in art classes and computer programming courses, Sarah had been dating the quarterback and planning her future empire. "Sarah, hi." I managed a smile. "Mom mentioned you opened another boutique. Congratulations." "Thank you. Number 3 actually opened last month on King Street. You simply must stop by. I'm carrying some amazing local designers now." She looked me up and down with the practiced eye of someone who made her living on appearances. Still in New York? That must be so exciting. Before I could answer, we were joined by a cluster of other familiar faces, the children of Charleston's. Old families, all of whom had stayed local, married well, and built the kinds of lives our parents understood and approved of. Madison runs a graphic design business, Sarah announced to the group. In Manhattan, no less. Oh, how brave of you, cooed Rebecca Washington, whose family owned half the historic district. I could never survive in such a gritty city. Don't you miss the gentility of the South? Sometimes, I lied smoothly, but New York has its own energy. And are you making a living at it? Asked Thomas Henderson, whose trust fund had allowed him to open 3 restaurants without ever worrying about profit margins. I mean, really supporting yourself? The creative fields can be so unpredictable. The conversation continued around me, a carefully choreographed dance of polite inquiries that were really judgment in disguise. Yes, I lived in a studio apartment. No, I wasn't married. Yes, I was still figuring things out at 26. Each answer seemed to confirm what they already believed, that Madison Pierce was the family disappointment, the one who'd rejected everything their world offered and had nothing to show for it. Ladies. And gentlemen! My father's voice boomed across the lawn as he stood and tapped his crystal glass with a silver spoon. The crowd gradually quieted, turning toward the head table where the Pierce family was seated. If I could have your attention for just a moment. Here it comes, I thought, making my way back to our table as Dad prepared to give his traditional speech. He'd done this at every major family event for as long as I could remember, holding court, establishing his position as patriarch, making sure everyone understood the Pierce family's place in Charleston society. 22 years ago, Patricia and I were blessed with a son, Dad began, his hand resting proudly on Jake's shoulder. Tonight, we celebrate not just his graduation summa cum laude from the University of South Carolina, but the beginning of what I know will be an extraordinary career in law and business. Applause rippled through the crowd. Jake stood briefly, waving with the modest confidence of someone who'd been groomed for this moment his entire life. The Pierce family has been part of Charleston's business community for 4 generations, Dad continued, his voice carrying easily across the lawn. My great-grandfather started with a single cotton warehouse. My grandfather expanded into shipping. My father built our first real estate ventures. And I've had the honor of growing our holdings into one of the Southeast's premier development companies. More applause. I clapped mechanically, playing my role. But a legacy means nothing without the next generation ready to carry it forward. Dad's eyes swept the crowd before landing squarely on me. That's why I'm so proud that Jake has chosen to follow the path of serious business, rather than... He paused, and I felt my stomach drop. Well, rather than chasing artistic dreams in expensive cities. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter went through the crowd. Several people glanced my way, their expressions ranging from sympathetic to smugly amused. Now, don't get me wrong, Dad continued, his tone suggesting he was being magnanimous. Madison has always been our creative child, and that's sweet. But there comes a time when we all have to grow up and contribute something meaningful to society. Something real. Something that builds wealth and stability for the next generation. The wine glass in my hand was shaking. I set it down carefully, focusing on keeping my expression neutral while every word felt like a slap across the face. I've watched too many young people waste their 20s on these so-called creative careers, graphic design, social media, photography, thinking they can make a living from hobbies. But the truth is, these industries are oversaturated with dreamers and short on actual opportunities. Sarah Mitchell was looking at me with poorly concealed pity. The Hendersons were nodding along approvingly. Even some of Jake's college friends were smirking, clearly enjoying the spectacle of the family screw-up being put in her place. Fortunately, Dad raised his glass higher, We have Jake to carry on the Pierce name with dignity and purpose, to build something that will last, something that will employ people and strengthen communities. That's what real success looks like, ladies and gentlemen. The applause was thunderous. People stood, raising their glasses to toast the golden child. While I sat frozen in humiliation so complete it felt like drowning. My father had just publicly declared that my entire adult life was worthless, that I was an embarrassment to the family name, that I was a cautionary tale about the dangers of following your dreams. To Jake Pierce, the crowd chorused, and the future of Charleston business. As everyone drank, Dad caught my eye across the table. For just a moment, I saw something flicker in his expression. Not regret exactly, but perhaps recognition that he'd gone too far. But then Thomas Henderson was slapping him on the back, congratulating him on his son's bright future, and the moment passed. "Excuse me?" I whispered to no one in particular, standing on unsteady legs. I made it to the edge of the property before the tears started, finding refuge behind the old gazebo where Jake and I used to play as children. My phone was buzzing insistently in my purse, but I ignored it, focusing on trying to breathe through the crushing weight of public humiliation. 26 years old, and my father had just announced to Charleston society that I was a failure, that my business was a joke, my dreams were childish, and my very existence was an embarrassment to the Pierce family legacy. If he only knew what was in my purse right now. The contracts that would change everything. The deal that would make his precious real estate empire look like pocket change. But as I stood there in the shadows, listening to the continued celebration of everything I would apparently never be, I had to make a choice. Stay silent and let his words define me forever, or find the courage to show him exactly how wrong he was. Have you ever been publicly humiliated by someone who was supposed to love and support you? How did you find the strength to fight back? The night was far from over, and I was about to discover that sometimes the greatest victories come from the deepest wounds. But first, I had to decide if I was brave enough to burn down everything he'd built his identity on. I stayed behind the gazebo for exactly 10 minutes, letting the tears fall and the humiliation wash over me like a cleansing rain. Then I dried, my eyes straightened my shoulders, and pulled out my phone to read the messages I'd been ignoring all evening. Congratulations, Madison. The board voted unanimously. Tech Vision Industries is prepared to offer $47 million for full acquisition of Pierce Creative Solutions. Papers ready for signature tomorrow morning. You did it. Richard Chen, attorney, $47 million. $47 million for the company I'd built from nothing in my studio apartment, working 18-hour days while eating ramen noodles and wondering if I'd ever prove everyone wrong. The hobby my father had just dismissed in front of 200 people was worth more than his entire real estate portfolio. My hands were steady now as I typed back, "I'll be there at 9 a.m., have the contracts ready." Then I walked back to the party. The celebration was in full swing when I returned. Jake was on the dance floor with Sarah Mitchell. My mother was holding court with the Charleston Garden Club ladies, and my father was deep in conversation with the mayor and several city council members about his waterfront development project. I walked straight to the bar, ordered a double whiskey, neat, and downed it in one burning gulp. The bartender, a young man who'd been watching the family dynamics all evening, raised an eyebrow. "Rough night?" he asked quietly. "About to get rougher," I replied, then walked directly to the microphone the band had been using between sets. The feedback screech as I tapped it got everyone's attention immediately. Conversations died mid-sentence. The dancing stopped. 200 pairs of eyes turned toward me with expressions ranging from curious to concerned. "Excuse me, everyone," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent lawn. "I hope you don't mind if I borrow the microphone for just a moment." My father's face had gone pale. He started moving toward me, but I held up a hand. "Dad, please, stay where you are. This won't take long." I looked out at the crowd, All these people who'd known me since childhood, who'd watched me grow up as the Pierce family disappointment, who'd just witnessed my public humiliation and thought it was justified. My name is Madison Pierce, and, as my father so eloquently explained earlier, I'm the family screw-up. The one who wasted her 20s on artistic dreams instead of building something real and meaningful. Uncomfortable murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jake had stopped dancing and was staring at me with growing alarm. What Dad didn't mention, probably because he never bothered to ask, is exactly what I've been building for the past 3 years, in New York. I pulled out my phone and held it up. This afternoon, I received confirmation that my company, Pierce Creative Solutions, has been acquired by Tech Vision Industries for $47 million. The silence was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the grass. 47 million, I repeated, letting the number sink in. For the graphic design hobby that he just told all of you was worthless. For the company that started in a studio apartment and now employs 37 people across 3 cities. For the business that will be featured on the cover of Forbes magazine next month as one of the most innovative design platforms in the country. My father was frozen in place, his face cycling through emotions too quickly to track. The mayor was staring at me with his mouth slightly open. Sarah Mitchell looked like she'd been slapped. But here's the thing that really makes this special, I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. Pierce Creative Solutions has been building the digital marketing platform for Charleston's new waterfront development project. You know, the one Dad's been working on for 2 years? The one he was just discussing with the mayor and city council? Robert Pierce went completely white, except now that my company belongs to Tech Vision Industries. And Tech Vision Industries has decided that Charleston's waterfront project doesn't align with their corporate values. Something about working with developers who publicly humiliate their own employees. Well, I shrugged. I guess that $20 million contract is going to have to find a new home. The crowd was starting to understand what was happening. Whispers began spreading like wildfire through the gathering. But don't worry, Dad. I'm sure you can find another platform to handle a project that complex. Maybe one of those real businesses you were talking about can step in. Though I should mention, the launch is scheduled for next month. So whoever takes over will need to rebuild 3 years of work in about 30 days. I set the microphone back on its stand and walked directly to my father. He was standing completely still, surrounded by Charleston's business elite, looking like a man who'd just watched his empire crumble in real time. By the way, I said quietly, for his ears only, Tech Vision Industries is also pulling their investment from the Harbor Square retail complex. You know, the one that was going to anchor your entire downtown expansion? Turns out they don't like working with partners who demonstrate toxic family dynamics and unprofessional public behavior. His voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. Madison, you can't. This will ruin everything. Everything? I tilted. My head. I thought you said what I do isn't real, isn't meaningful. How can something that doesn't matter ruin everything? Jake appeared at my side, his face flushed with panic. Maddie, what are you doing? This is crazy. No, Jake. Crazy was sitting here for 26 years letting him treat me like I was worthless. Crazy was pretending that his approval mattered more than my own success. This? I gestured around at the stunned crowd, at my father's shocked face, at the carefully constructed world of Charleston society, watching their hierarchy crumble. This is just business. I turned to address the crowd one final time. Thank you all for coming to celebrate Jake's graduation. He really is brilliant, and I hope he gets the chance to build something he's passionate about, rather than just something Dad approves of. As for me, I'll be flying back to New York tomorrow to finalize the biggest acquisition deal in my industry's history. I started walking toward the house, then paused and looked back at my father. Oh, and Dad? Next time you want to give a speech about what real success looks like, you might want to check Forbes first. Just saying. The silence stretched for another heartbeat, then exploded into chaos. Voices erupted across the lawn as Charleston's elite processed what they'd just witnessed. The Pierce family legacy hadn't just been challenged, it had been completely inverted. The failure had become the success story, and the patriarch had been revealed as a man who didn't even know what his own daughter had accomplished. As I walked through the house toward the front door, I could hear fragments of conversation behind. Me, $47 million. Did she really just destroy Robert Pierce's biggest deals? I can't believe she was the Pierce Creative Solutions founder. This is going to be all over Charleston by morning. My mother caught up with me in the foyer, her face streaked with tears and mascara. "Madison, please," she whispered. "Your father. He didn't mean it the way it sounded." I stopped and looked at her. Really looked at her. Probably for the first time in years. "Mom, how many times did I try to tell you about my company? How many phone calls where I mentioned clients and contracts and growth, and you just changed the subject to ask when I was coming home or whether I'd met any nice men?" She opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again. "I love you," I said, simply. "But I'm done waiting for this family to see me. I see myself now, and that's enough." The Uber was already waiting when I reached the street. As we drove away from the Pierce estate, I could see the party continuing behind us. But everything had changed. The lights were the same, the music was the same, but the power structure that had defined Charleston society for generations had just shifted on its axis. My phone started ringing immediately. Reporters, business contacts, industry colleagues, who'd somehow already heard about the acquisition announcement. By morning, the story would be everywhere. Local woman builds $47 million company while family dismisses her dreams. But the sweetest call came at midnight, just as I was boarding. My red-eye flight back to New York. It was Jake. "Maddie?" His voice was shaky. "I need to ask you something. That law school thing Dad's been planning for me. What if I don't want that? What if I want to build something different? Something that's actually mine?" I smiled as the plane taxied toward the runway, leaving Charleston and all its expectations behind. "Then you call me when you're ready to start, little brother. I know a thing or two about building something from nothing." As we lifted off into the night sky, I looked down at the city lights growing smaller below. The Pierce family legacy wasn't dead, it was just beginning. But this time, we were going to write it ourselves. Have you ever had to choose between family approval and following your own path? Sometimes the people who love us most are the ones who see us least clearly. The greatest revenge isn't destroying someone else's dreams. It's building your own so successfully that their opinion stops mattering. That night in Charleston, I didn't just prove my father wrong, I proved myself right. And sometimes, that's the only validation you really need.